Hello, I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. And this week I'm going to show you how to make an easy yet impactful memento box for all your treasured items, or just to have. So, let's roll the intro! So for this video, I'm going to make a memento box to hold my grandfather's pipe. Now, before we start, smokers or jokers? No. But this is a memento, one of the few things we have of his. So, I'm going to make a box to keep it safe, so people can see it and you can go, oh, what's that? So, let's go down to the bench, I'll show you what the plan is. So this is the design. So I'm going to make a simple box that will be put together using only mitre joints. Now I'm going to use my chop saw, but you can cut these joints just as easily with a mitre box or a jig that you make up to cut 45s. Once I have these glued up, then I'm going to put little splines in to support the corners of the box and of the lid. I'll show you when I do that how to go about doing that. It adds a nice little feature because we'll use a different material here. So I'm going to make the box out of ash, but I'll probably use a piece of teak or mahogany for these, so we get a nice little colour variation when it's all done. And in this there I'm going to make a lid, and much like we did last week with the desk where I made the shelves in it, the little coveys to hold my hard drives and such, we're going to rebed this piece of perspex into the frame so we can see into the box and display the item. The box then is just going to be held together with a little pair of magnets here, and we're going to take a scoop out of the lid and out of the front to create a built-in handle. Now, the first thing I did was I machined all my stock down to size using all my machines, but this is easily enough attainable from scraps of stock if you have them. Somebody might have material that would match that thickness. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to cut the widths here of our top piece and cut the groove in while it's still in the full length. And then we'll start making up our unit, our little box, pardon me. And we'll do a similar thing here. We'll cut the full height of the box and cut the groove for the recessed base in while it's all at full length. This makes it a safer operation and also means that everything lines up just perfect. So we have all our little bits cut, and as long a length as I can make them for safety. First thing I'm going to do is put all the grooves in my top pieces here, matching it to this. I should be able to do that with just 2 saw grooves. And then I'll put a groove all along the bottom that will receive the bottom, and then do the same on the bottom. Okay, so let's do that.
Now of course this can be done just with a handsaw and a chisel, but if you're using a table saw you want to be careful to always use the correct PPE. And as you can see here, I'm pushing the material through with my push stick and using a piece of scrap to keep it tight at the fence. This will keep our groove nice and straight. And then when I have all of them cut, I take the sample piece that I did first and then move the fence onto that second pass. Gives me a nice tight fit on the piece of perspex. You can see me doing that here now, where I just move the fence, keep chipping it until I'm sure that the width is just perfect.
So, we're just going to do the base. Again, I'm going to do it here in the saw, but this can simply be done with a handsaw as well. So essentially, I'm just highlighting here. What I'm going to do, is a little focus, is take out the areas in black there all around. This will give me a lip all around my base that we can sit a groove into. Now we'll put a matching groove here on our sides, so when it all goes together then inside we'll have nice clean bottom, and that allows then the timber to expand and contract gap may happen at the bottom here. We won't glue this in. That's vital to make sure that it can expand and contract and not crack. And then we'll just make our cuts for the sides and do the same for the top.
Unfortunately, my camera died during filming this and the footage was corrupted, but in order to create that lip, all I did was make a pass on all the edges with the wide face of the bottom on the bed of the saw. I then turned it up on its thin edge and made another pass on all the edges, creating that lip. And we'll pick it back up here now when I'm cutting the groove in the side to match that lip. The process for this is identical to what we did for the top. We're just going to make one pass through the saw and then adjust the fence in order to create that second pass. That'll give us the width that we need for our groove.
Right, so let's give it a try. Legitimately first time I'm doing it on camera. This might be a great idea. That's a little bit tight, but we'll give it a rub. It's nice and flush. Let's try that. So the setup I have is not perfect accurate. It's an entry level saw, so I probably will have to do just a little bit of fettling. But I'm happy enough with that for the minute. So now we're going to cut our mitres.
The perfect mitre is almost as elusive as a unicorn. The key that I've found to getting these bang on is in preparation. So if you're using a chop saw like I am here, make sure that you cut a piece that's as high and as deep as your saw will cut and check against that, ensuring that it's at 90 up and down and at 45 exactly on the edge. Trust me, you will thank me later when you do it. And the same applies if you're making a jig. Ensure that all those edges are perfect. And here I just check everything before I go too far, that my base is straight and square and that everything is lining up. The other thing is that measuring is the enemy of accuracy. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but for the like of this, I always mark my pieces directly where the joints are going to happen and then I cut them. Because trust me, if you just measure them out, you will always end up with a piece that's too short or too long. Too long is easy to solve, you can always cut it, but it always gives you a subpar cut. So that's Mike's little mitering 101. So get back to the video.
Now, just on the dry fit, everything is nice and tight. So I'll glue these together. Like I said, for the moment, that's also going to hold it together, but we're going to put in splines. And I'll show you how to make a quick jig for doing that. But you can also just do it by hand. So now for a bit of music and a bit of glue up. This went well dry. It's going to be a disaster wet, so I'll give you music to cover the swearing.
Itself is drying. I cut my piece of plexiglass from my top. Now, plexiglass can be cut with most woodworking tools, but it's vitally important to have eye protection and wear a mask.
So this is nice and fitted, and to glue this together we're going low tech. How low tech? This low tech. Just got to use elastic bands. it's time to cut our splines. I've already started with my splines. This is my spline cutting jig. It's just simple 45 glued on a base that can go against the fence of my saw. So as that goes through, the saw blade will come up here and cut out that slot that I want, nice straight and square in the corner. Now I've already done the top here, just using that method. It gives me these nice spline cuts all the way around. So the last one I have to do is center a spline on these. So I'm just going to adjust my fence using the same jig and do that cut.
And one thing to be very careful about here is making sure that your hands are well away from the blade, because we have quite a lot of blade exposed there to cut through the jig. So I'm paying special attention to keeping my hand as far away from the blade as possible. So I'm keeping my hand all the way on the outside and as high as I can. And now all that's left to do is to insert our splines. So the spline, in order to give strength, is using the long grain. So I've just cut a slip that's the exact same thickness as my saw groove out of this teak. It'll give a nice contrast, and then I just hammer those in until they're tight on that straight cut that the saw has created for me. Now, I did make a mistake here, which I hope you can avoid. I just cut this off the end of a piece of exchange stock, and as you can see there, it cracked. So you don't want to make your splines too high, particularly because you're driving down on the point at which is most likely to crack, where the grain is the shortest. And when they're dry, we just lob them babies off and give everything a final sand, and we're ready then to do the final touches of applying hinges and the magnetic catch. I'm going to use some neodymium magnets for that, and I'm going to put in a groove to act as a handle.
Okay, so we're all sanded. You can see how really nice those splines look. So we're going to mark now for our hinges. What I like to do is base it off the hinge itself. So I'm going to put the hinge. There's no barrel side on this one. So I'm going to put the hinge barrel right against that line and then just score across the hinge. This should give me a nice tight joint. Or pocket, sorry, for the hinge. Now, chippy chippy time. So, I like to square my lines up first, so let's give a walloper. So, I like to go into those knife lines. First, just a light tap to square the shoulder. Again, like all making, you want to use as wide a chisel as you can. Be careful when you're driving down here so you don't split it out. And once we have those settled in, then what we're going to start doing is making feathers. So this will take a little bit of time to know how deep you're going. I'm just going to make your way all the way across, cutting up those little feathers. And then when you're all the way across, you just put your chisel in nice and straight and cut up to that back line. You keep doing that a little bit at a time until you're down to where you need to be. I'll do the same then on this side and on the top. We should have a nice clean hinge. For this, because we're going to have the lid sit flat, Normally you would put a hinge in, if you were just hinging a door, you'd hinge it so that it was flush. But I want my hinges slightly below the surface so that when it closes, roughly half the barrel is under the surface. I'll do the same on the top. Well, it's just a matter of patience, removing a little bit at a time and you're down to the depth you want. Just keep going.
And time jump. We're done. That only took milliseconds. So here we are now at the fitting stage, and I just thought I'd stop and show you this because I find that the best thing, particularly when you're using well, these are new, but using brass screws, is you have to have a pre-bore. I like, particularly for small tin screws like this, to use my bradawl for that pre-bore. And I just put in the bradawl holes and then just generally put it in with either, if it's an actual brass screw, I will use a hand screwdriver, or in this case they're brass coated, so I just use an electric drill. And then when the top is fitted, I do the same with the top. I just mark my hinge positions and then put my little pilot hole in my bradawl, and then we have a hinged box.
Now we have our hinge, we're nearly done. So the last thing to do to the box itself is I'm going to put in a little scoop here and a little magnet to hold it closed. Then we'll make a little cradle for the object, in this case as it says the pipe, and we should be done. I'm just going to put this scoop in with my Dremel tool. So I'll just mark where I want it to be and then scoopy scoopy.
I decided to put my magnets in first. That should give me a place to stop for my scoop. So just using my trick of drilling in reverse to get a good clean edge, I drill a hole and then fix the magnets in just using some super glue. For the scoop, as I said, I'm just going to use my Dremel tool, and I'm mostly eyeing this. I've marked a start and end point, and I just keep working on them until I can get my finger in there so it's nice and easy to open and close it, and that it's nice and even top and bottom.
I think we could say we have a handle on that. Terrible joke. So now the final thing is the display. I happen to have this piece of foam, which is from an old microphone, and it sits just beautifully around this. So I'm going to cut my foam a little bit bigger than the inside of the box so it keeps itself there under its own stress. We'll position it, make sure it's okay, and then it's the usual time. And there we have it. Snug as a bug in a rug. On display. Can't go anywhere. This is nice and top, so I can hold this way and hold that way. Let's get some finish on this baby. So, that's the end of this week's video. This turned out really good. And I don't see why it couldn't turn out really good for you as well. All you need to do is, like I said, just take the time and be patient when you're cutting the mitres. You'll end up with something that looks just as slick as this. So, this little box is going to wing its way back to my home house, where it'll take pride of place on a shelf. Yeah. Don't forget, if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. Absolutely do. Try this at home.